Hey everybody, Jonathan Fields back with another episode of Good Life Project with a dear friend of mine, Susan Piver. Susan has done some really amazing things in her life. Starting out in the music business, six-time author, New York Times best-selling author, Shambhala Buddhist meditation teacher, and she's doing something really cool which ties all of this together right now. So we're going to kind of get into that. And I want to share one line that I love that you sort of wrote in your official bio, which is, I practice formal sitting meditation, acting right, being nice, digging deep, and forgiving myself when I screw up.
That is my practice.
which kind of sums it all up. I love that just sort of approach to life. So I want to talk about what you're up to now, but let's kind of zoom the lens back a little bit. You were in the music business for a solid chunk of years. Mm-hmm. What were you doing?
I was working at different independent record labels in some capacity, like sales, marketing, general management, and so forth. I worked on the record label side, and so I dealt with artists, I dealt with distribution, I dealt with the music scene in general.
How did you get into that?
Well, I had a very unusual career path. I was driving through Austin, Texas by happenstance, and my car broke down, and I didn't have enough money to fix it. So I got a job at a bar, and it happened to be
which there are many in Austin, Texas.
Quite a few. This happened to be the best one.
Of course.
An amazing blues club.
Right.
With a live music scene that was like gave rise to Stevie Ray Vaughan and
Was
Jimmy
this
Vaughan.
around the time that Stevie Ray Vaughan was still in Austin?
Yeah, it was. I mean, this was the house band.
Wow.
And then at one point, they pulled up a 24-track mobile unit and started making records. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, you don't work in the day, so maybe you could come down and ship boxes and...
So that was your entry?
That was it. And then the owner of the club went to prison. So then I was the only one there.
So all of a sudden you're like, I'm running a music label.
Okay, I'm in charge.
That's funny. So it was just like complete serendipity to a certain extent.
As my whole life has been, I would say. Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of a fascinating way to live.
Yes, I don't seem to have a choice about it. So that's how it is. And then I went to to several different record companies after that, ending up at a hip hop label in New York called Tommy Boy.
Mm-hmm, sure. So so let's just kind of talk about this right out of the gate. There's so much conversation around people sort of like trying to lay out every detail of your life. Okay, here's my plan. I'm going to go to this school. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that and do that and that. And I've seen so many people follow that plan pretty well, and then they get here and they realize, okay, I followed the plan perfectly. I did everything. I'm where I want to be according to the plan. But life kind of sucks. And it seems like your life, and we'll explore more of it, has been more of you're called to, it's less this is the plan and more what feels right. Yeah,
that's true. For better or worse, every time I have tried to make a plan, it has been slapped back in my face. So at a certain point, at about when I was like 30 or 35, I just said, well, this is how it is. So, but it's not like when you go by vibe or feel or instinct, and I'm sure you know this, it's not like you just sort of sit around and wait for life to give you a buzz or something, and you're constantly feeling into the environment and looking at opportunities and responding to things. And what I learned after a certain point is it doesn't really matter what I tell the world I want. What matters is what the world is telling me that I can respond to today. And then a path sort of seems to construct itself.
Yeah, but I guess you have to be open to that.
Yes, you do.
Which I sense not a lot of people are.
I agree.
Why?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, for me, I was compelled to act that way because just from when I was a child, I never could make it work in the traditional setting. I was a very bad student. I flunked 8th grade. I barely graduated high school. I never went to college. I always was sort of pushed back upon myself because for whatever reason, I couldn't make the institutions that I was in work for me. So I sort of learned it from a young age, but for other people, me too, of course, there's a kind of fear that if you just let go and open and feel who you are and what the world around you is telling you, that you will not be able to handle it. And so we need a plan that makes us feel safe. But it's an illusion.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty powerful. So the plan for a lot of people is an anchor, but it's sort of like anchored into nothing.
Yeah, and that said, we all have to be very pragmatic about our lives. We can't just ignore the realities of finance and home and family.
Right, sure.
We have to be extremely practical. But we can't get confused about what the priority is. The practicalities and security, or sort of fulfilling your mission on Earth. You can't get confused about which one of those is more important.
So which one is? Security, obviously. Fake security is everything.
Fake security rules.
Need to wake up in the morning and know. Yeah, I mean, there's a great sense of I think, combined fear and exhilaration of waking up every day and saying, okay, I have a sense of what I'm here to do, but at the same time, I can't tell you exactly where this is going. Right. And I can't tell you 10 years from now exactly what I'm going to be doing, how I'm going to be doing, or how much money I'm going to have, or how many houses, whatever it is. But as much as there's fear, I think when you open to it, the other side is exhilaration, it's possibility. But I think I feel, at least I felt in my own life, that the fear so often keeps you from opening to that place.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you must know this dynamic intimately because the way your own life has unfolded.
To a certain extent.
But go ahead.
Yeah, no. So you're hanging out in the music business for 10 years or so?
10 years. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then you make a pretty radical transition. What unfolds?
Well, I left the music business in the year 2000. Mm-hmm. And it was, anybody could see the writing on the wall. Anybody. And anybody can see the writing on the wall in the publishing industry.
Yeah. It's just a couple decades later.
Yeah, but we all know how this story ends.
Right.
And so, but that said, I wasn't like, I am seeing the future and now I will change my destiny. The division that I was working for sort of folded, and there was no job in the music business that I could think of that I wanted. Mm. Would I want to work for this company? Would I want to work for this band? I couldn't really think of any job I wanted. And at the same time, by circumstance, I was getting married, and I'd never been married. And I thought, why would I do this to someone I love? Because quite often, this doesn't seem to work out too well. And
wait, why would you do what to someone?
Marry them. I really like this person. Why would I do that to him?
Why would you ruin it by... Okay.
So I thought, well, I'd had other relationships, and I was no longer in those relationships, but I loved those people too. So what is different about this? And so anyway, I just sort of sat down and I was like, there's a difference between loving someone and loving your life together. And my other relationships had failed because we didn't love our life together, not because we didn't love each other. So anyway, I thought, well, I do love this guy and I think he loves me, but what do I know about our life? So I just wrote down questions like, where will we live? Because we lived in two different cities, and what is your kid going to call me? And are we going to put our money in the same bank account? And someone said to me, oh, that would make a good book. I was like, oh. And I knew an agent, and I said, do you think this would make a good book? And he said, maybe. Here's how you write a proposal. And anyway, so I did, and it got published, and then I was a writer and a relationships expert.
I mean, literally, there's a lot of serendipity happening here. You're driving through Austin, your car breaks down, and bam, you're in the music business. You see the handwriting on the wall in the music business, and you're sort of moving out, and then you're thinking about this relationship. Do I want to marry this person? I'm going to make a list. Any intention at all of actually being a writer? Any thought in your prior life of I'm a writer?
No. I mean, when I was a little girl, yes. All I did was write. I wrote stories, I wrote reports, I wrote, my thoughts. And my mother reminded me a few years ago that I asked her if I could take a year off of high school just to write.
No kidding.
Yeah. But
so it was in there.
It was in there, yeah.
Huh. So you end up writing essentially a series of questions. Turns into a book. Turns into a big book. What happens with the book?
Yes.
Like, I know you're very humble, but let's fill this out.
Okay. So, I wish I could tell you I was a brilliant strategist and marketer, but the truth is I was sitting at my desk, I had left the music business, and I had started my own business as a book packager, combining audio and a book. And that was quite innovative at the time, and I loved doing it, and it was fun. So I'm sitting at my desk, and I'm on the phone talking to someone about paper stock in Hong Kong, and my assistant says, the Oprah show's on the other line. And I'm like, I'll call you back. And that's how, then I was on Oprah twice.
So the book comes out and you were on Oprah twice?
Yeah, like a year after it came out.
Right. So it was, how did the book do? I'm curious when it first came out.
It did okay.
Right.
It got a good article, actually, in Oprah magazine, which was new at the time. And, probably sold 20,000 copies or something, which was okay for a first book.
Yeah, admirable.
Book of questions.
Right. And then you hit the Oprah show.
Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting because, it was amazing. It was a fantastic experience. And, however, and I'm not saying this again, there were other authors on the same show I was. There were like 4 of us. Mm-hmm. But my book became a New York Times bestseller, and theirs didn't. And it wasn't because my book was better than theirs.
So what was it?
It wasn't because I was like the super great guest either. It was because my book, I learned so much from this. My book was very simple to explain. It's called The Hard Questions, 100 Essential Questions to Ask Before You Say I Do. I get it. It's not my opinion. It's something that you do that helps you. It's not me telling you what the answer should be. And it was very easy to communicate in a flash what it was. And I think that's what really, that's what really sort of pushed it over the top.
It's really interesting to me also because one of the things that you're told in any sort of personal development, self-help, prescriptive book world is that if you want to sell books, you have to position yourself as the guru. The one with all the answers. And I have always, as a writer, I've always been so uncomfortable with that because I'm not. I'm not that person. Mm-hmm. Right? So, and what you did was essentially say, I don't have any of the answers, but what I do know are the questions.
Yep.
And the questions have amazing value.
Exactly.
And I think that's an extraordinary lesson for a lot of people who are not out there doing things that they feel compelled or called to do, because they feel like they don't have the answers yet. Mm-hmm.
We can trust ourselves to come up with the answers.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times the harder thing is the questions.
Yeah. To open yourself to, I've learned so much about questions from this because I wrote other books of questions too after that, and just the power of an open question is quite extraordinary, because to ask a question genuinely, you have to drop any notion of an answer, and that in itself is very valuable. So you have to let go. That's what opening is. That's how you open, is you let go of concept. And so when you really hold a question genuinely, you truly wonder about it, I don't know, your mind expands simply by the question. It's a very interesting exercise.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. But I think again, for so many people, it's an uncomfortable place to be.
Sure.
To live in the question.
Yeah.
We want to touch stone in every possible way that we can in life. So, it's like we don't want to ask the question. And then when we do, we don't want to linger in it.
Yeah, I agree. And then there are people who say, I'm going to live in the question as a strategy. Because someone told me I should live in the question. So I'm going to live in the question because I think that's the right way to get answers. Mm-hmm. And you can't game this situation.
I was just thinking when I was, shortly after college, I was telling you before, I rented a room in a little house out in the Hamptons. I was painting, and the guy who actually owned the house was the son of one of the biggest developers in the Hamptons, but he wanted to be a writer. And he left the house in the middle of the summer because he read that to be a great writer, you have to go out and experience pain in the world. Like all the great writers, were destitute and had no money. So he rented a station wagon and was just going to drive into the middle of the country and just, live on a lot of money. So he could experience, that pain and that suffering, all the while knowing that this was like very tactical. And at any given moment, he could have dialed his cell phone and said, Dad, can you fly the helicopter out and grab me?
Oh my God.
Not the same experience.
Did it work?
I'd never get in touch with him. He was gone, but I can't imagine.
I know.
It did.
I am very fascinated and attracted to and magnetized by those things in our lives that we cannot game. And creative expression is one of them. I mean, you can do things to make it easier for yourself to express yourself, but ultimately you can't game creativity, and you can't game love. You can't make those things be there when they're not, and you can't make them go away when they are. And those are the things I like.
Creativity and love?
Yep.
Yeah, two good things to like.
You know.
Talk to me more about gaming love.
Yeah. I know. Isn't that funny? It's like, it's bigger than us. And I'm not saying that in a Hallmark kind of way. It's like when you fall in love with someone, there is an element of choicelessness in it. It happens. And we've all gone out with people that were like, oh, they totally fit my list, they're funny, they have a job, they're smart, whatever it is, but I don't feel anything. And I'm sure we've also all had the experience, or I have, of meeting someone totally wrong and feeling that thing. So you can't predict it, you can't control it, and then when it's gone, my friend, at a certain point of goneness, this is my experience, this is not a truth that all people should obey, there's nothing you can do to bring it back. That said, I've married now for over 10 years, and there are plenty of times where I look at my husband and I'm like, not only do I not love you, I don't particularly like you. And I'm sure he's felt the same about me, but and we go through these phases of distance and closeness. But at some point with this particular person, for me, the love always reawakens. Through something simple, like I just look at him and I like his hair, and I'm like, oh, I love him. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, you wonder if there's something about sitting in that place where you're like, long enough for the cycle to come back, and not only do you feel like, oh yeah, but you feel like it's deeper. I mean, at least I'm married 15 years now, and my wife and I are closer than ever.
That's great.
Before. It's like I wake up every morning and I'm like smiling, I'm like blessed. I just stare at her while she's sleeping for a couple seconds, because I'm like, wow. But I wonder if there's a sense of almost, I don't have to stay in this. You know, there's so much opportunity these days that instead of sitting in I need to breathe into this, I need to have conversations, I need to sort of like really work on this. People are more like, I'll go see what else is out there in the world.
Sure. And you know, who can say when it's right to do that
right.
and when it's
I guess
not?
that's one of the really tough questions.
It really, really is, and nobody can answer it. But this is where the Buddhist notion of discipline comes in very handy. In Buddhist thought, discipline is not thought of as like this onerous straitjacket that you have to wear to force yourself to do things you don't like. But one way to consider it is all discipline means is the willingness and ability to come back. Not to come back for a particular outcome, or not to come back because you're supposed to, but just to bring your attention back. And so I found in my relationship that this notion of discipline is very handy to feel like, even because when I don't like him and I'm not happy about our relationship, I just want to get away. But somehow, if I can manage to just bring my mind back to feel what it feels like to not want to be with this person right now, or to be with this person, then I notice that it's always changing. And so discipline is, important, but by this definition of.
Right. Which kind of is a nice segue into how you've continued to evolve. So you went from music into writing, tremendous New York Times best-selling book, 6 books since then. Somewhere along the path, you really started to explore Eastern philosophy and Buddhism in particular.
Yeah.
How did that start to enter your life?
Well, I appreciate you asking me that very much. I became a Buddhist in 1995, formally, when I was still in the music business. And it was just what I did, and I was very happy, and I remained extremely happy about that decision. And then I just tried to...
Well, were you brought up sort of around faith before that at all?
Yeah,
or?
I was brought up Jewish.
Okay.
And I'm still Jewish.
Right.
But I'm a Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tried to act according to what I was studying, being kind and being sharp and so forth. And even my books of questions, they weren't Buddhist books, obviously, but to me they were an expression of my practice, because I was trying to help people, starting with myself, turn in, have an inner life, find their own answers. Because one of the things that really attracted me to Buddhism, in fact, the very moment I became attracted to it, was when I read its particular notion that the only possible spiritual path is your own experience. When I read that, I was like, well, that makes total sense. I must be a Buddhist. I didn't know that's what it was called. So this was my effort to help people tune into their own experience, their own path, and separate themselves from dogma and culture and so forth to find their own truth. And then that was what it was for me, but I never really said that.
Right. So, but I mean, it becomes a pretty substantial part of who you are in your life, to the extent that, you know, when moving down the road, this becomes, at some point, the writing and the Buddhism start to converge.
Yeah.
And it becomes part of, you know, like what you do.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, I was a book packager. And I produced projects for Andrew Weil and Mark Hyman and Rodney Yee and different people that, because I was like, well, you write your book about something, but you don't really tell people how to do it. You don't really walk them through it. So let's create a multimedia thing, and so forth. So one of my customers for many of my projects was St. Martin's Press. And I really liked them. I love them. And I was telling them, you know, you should really do like a meditation in a box kind of thing. And you could do this teacher, and you could work with that teacher, and I could produce it, and so forth. And they were like, well, why couldn't you write it? And I was like, no. And we kept talking about it, and
Why the no?
Because I'm not, at the time, and I still I don't think of myself as a teacher. I think of myself as a student. And so I thought about it, because I was like, what else am I going to do with my precious human birth that could be better than this? So, okay, I can't write it as a teacher, like this is what you should do, but I can write about it from the point of view of a student. This is what it is like to study these things, and this is what it has been like in my life, the impact that they've had and the changes they've made and so forth. And I continue to hold that stance in my writing.
So it's really, what else could I do with my human birth?
Precious human birth?
Precious human birth that could be better than this?
Yeah.
That's a kick-ass question.
You know, when you're faced with something and that notion comes to your mind, like, this might be the best thing I could do with my life, the most valuable, the best contribution, the most challenging, you know, what are you going to do? You sort of have to do it.
So it's almost like you're being called into the role of being a teacher, but you're really resisting. But then you're saying, but what better thing is there for me to be able to do?
And then that book came out like 5 years ago. And then I became a teacher. And I studied more, and I deepened my own practice tremendously in order to write that book, because, you know, I don't want to be a phony baloney. So yeah. I started going on many retreats and studying, and I went to a seminary, and I really immersed myself. But I still always wanted to maintain my own voice, not like I'm just going to be myself, but because I wanted it to be natural and personal, and because that's me. But in that intervening 5 years, I've had to find what it's like, and I would love to hear your thoughts about this, to take your seat as a teacher. That is a very interesting thing to do. And may I turn the tables for a moment and ask you, as a teacher, how did you do that, and what did it feel like, and was there a moment or?
Yeah, I'm still immensely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
In that role. You know, I taught yoga. I've taught to thousands, if not tens of thousands of people over a 7-year window. And honestly, when I first started, I had no business doing it. I went out and I memorized I bought the top 10 selling yoga DVDs, some of which you probably packaged, and memorized the routines, and showed up at the studio and taught. One day I'm Baron, one day I'm Rodney, one day, until I went out and trained and you know, sort of found a set of baseline confidence. But even to this day, similar to you, I still feel so much the student. And I actually love being the student, that I'm not comfortable saying that I know more than you, or saying, but so what I do is I never say that. my approach has been, I have the luxury, I have the gift of having crafted a career that allows me the time to get paid to study things all day long that people only think about sporadically. So whatever I've discovered along the way, if I can share that and that's of benefit, then that's fabulous. And that sort of allows me that comfort where I don't have to position myself as the guru or the person who knows a tremendous amount. I just know enough to share.
That's great.
And I'm open to the fact that plenty of times I'm dead wrong too.
Yep.
And that's part of my journey as a student.
That to me makes a trustworthy teacher. I trust you. And I trust someone that teaches from that point of view of, I've just been doing this longer than you, but I'm not different than you. And I will share my experience with you, and I might be wrong.
And I think it's also so personal.
Yeah.
There are the teachings, there's the philosophy, there are ideas and questions and lessons. But how relevant that is to each individual's life, that's where I get really hesitant.
Right.
Because I've studied a lot, I've experienced life a lot, but I can only speak from my personal experience.
Me too. And I was just at a gathering of meditation instructors in my Buddhist lineage, and my teacher, Sakyong Mipam, said the most perfect, wonderful thing. He said to us, meditation teachers, don't teach anyone anything. Help them discover something. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. I can't teach anybody anything, but I can help create the circumstances where you can discover the truth for yourself.
Which brings you back to the first book you wrote.
That's a good point.
Which is comfortable teaching people how to ask the questions so that they can discover it themselves.
Yeah.
Huh. So it really all ties in. So even back then, that same philosophy was part of you.
It was. It was. I've always been like, I'm independent and I'm an independent thinker and blah, blah, blah. And when I was young, it was so obnoxious. But now I feel like, okay, I'm trying to hold the best of that inclination. Yeah,
and what I love also is that it's very real world. And your teacher, Sakyong Mipam, is when I first discovered him, I started, I love the philosophy, I love the lineage. But what I also loved was that, he's a competitive dude.
Yeah.
He's like, he talks the talk and walks the walk, and he's very revered in the Shambhala tradition. But at the same time, he's a marathoner, an equestrian, hardcore runner and athlete.
Hardcore.
And I had always looked at sort of Eastern philosophy as non-aspirational. It's all supposed to be about the journey and the getting there. There is no there, and that desire to get somewhere is a bad word. And so it opened my eyes to say, okay, is there some difference between desire and aspire? And is it okay to strive for something really kick-ass?
Yeah.
And at the same time, live in the world like a real person.
Yeah.
But still, explore a gentler philosophy or ask some of the similar questions that come out of that tradition.
I think those are really great questions. And I share those questions. And one thing I've noticed about Sakyong Mipam that I find amazing and that I aspire to and also desire is, and I think this is where his skillfulness comes in. He starts running, he started running when he was 40, and then 3 years later he was running marathons. And there's something about his ability to hold his mind completely to what he is doing. For most of us, for me, I can't always hold my mind to what I'm doing. It pulses away, it comes back, it spaces out, it goes to sleep, it wonders about lunch. But somehow these great practitioners can hold their mind to what they're doing so thoroughly that kind of accomplishment cannot be avoided.
And what's interesting too, because if we talk about one of the fundamental practices, which is meditation, which is sitting, is fundamentally about training that capability. And the net result of that, it's almost like over time it can't help but be pretty extraordinary, even though I guess in teaching it's not supposed to be about a net result.
Yes, and if it is about a net result, then it won't work. But if the practice is letting go into the technique and the experience of that particular meditation session then these crazy results seem to begin to accrue pretty much from the first time you sit to practice. So sometimes people ask me in my role as a meditation teacher, how long do I have to practice before I start seeing results? And the answer is kind of
I
like...
think I may have asked you that at one point. I'm like thinking, did I ever ask you that?
I mean, I think it's a question that's crossed all of our minds. Right. How long do I have to do this? Come on.
Come on.
Right? And the answer is, according to me, is immediately. You'll see a result immediately. And it will take a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is the good and the bad.
Right. Mm-hmm.
All wrapped up in one. So many people, part of your role these days, you're still a writer, you still do a lot of interesting things, but an emerging part of what you do is meditation teacher, and you speak all over the world, and you teach meditation. And we'll talk about in a second, you've even built something really cool around bringing that to a lot of people. As you do that, I mean, and I have this fascination also with meditation, especially a mindfulness approach to meditation. It's getting really hot in Western society. I mean, it's been hot in Eastern society for a couple thousand years, right? But it's getting really. How have you sort of like seen the shift in how like what you do and how people like want it and experience it and receive it?
My cultural, the alpha and omega of my cultural barometer is my mother's country club. And like 5 years ago or something, she was scared to tell her friends that her daughter was a meditation teacher. Not scared, but she was kind of like, well, she's into alternative lifestyle things.
She's a writer.
Yes, exactly.
Very successful, too.
Yes, she was on Oprah.
Very.
That changed everything for my parents. Bless their hearts. But now they have guest speakers come into the country club to teach them about meditation. Mm-hmm. So it really has, and the gateway for us in the West is science. So the first sort of wave in our lifetime of interest in meditation was sort of TM in the 70s, when there are all these studies that are like, you can lower your blood pressure and sit out in the cold and not be cold and so forth. And that is very important for us in the West. And now in the mid-90s to now, there's been another wave of research into more Tibetan practices and how the effect of compassion on your health and so forth. And that lowers our defenses.
Yeah. Well, I think we're always seeking for, the rational brain is always seeking for a reason to justify allocating time to doing something in particular. And what I've seen is that there was sort of a first wave of people being open to it for stress management and disease reduction. But now, and tell me if this has been your experience also, I've seen now people are getting even more interested in it for performance aspects. Because now there's a whole bunch of research that shows that it changes your creativity and your cognitive function and all this. Question being, great, so if that draws you to the practice and you develop really fast, awesome. But at the same time, does that sort of like inciting incident or reason set people up to fail because they're drawn to it with a very specific performance goal in mind?
I don't think so. I think if anyone says, I'm going to sit for 10 minutes a day because I want my presence to be more authentic, that's fantastic. You should do that. You should sit for 10 minutes a day and your presence will become more authentic. And that's fantastic. And I hope everyone in the world will do that. It will have a positive effect on almost everyone. It's not for everyone, but for almost everyone. But then for some smaller percentage of those people, the practice will become so powerful. Not that their practice is more powerful than other people's, but their engagement, their excitement, their passion for the practice will be such that they want to pursue it as a path. And then it starts to become a little bit different. But it's like, should everyone exercise? Sure. Should everyone be, Olympic athletes? No.
Right. So when you say that some people will start to pursue it as a path and then it becomes different, how so?
That's a good question. Well, on one level, meditation is the world's best stress reduction tool. If it was a pill, it would be a miracle drug.
Right.
And so that's great, and you can use it for that. But it is also a way to see reality clearly, and thus is a path to enlightenment. And so, but it depends on your view and your intention in the practice. And I'm not saying everybody has to be a meditator who wants to become enlightened, but for some people, that will be the main draw. And so when that's the draw, when it's your path, as opposed to a habit that you've cultivated to benefit other aspects of your life, which is really and truly great, it's different than when it is a path that you rely on to deepen your experience of what it's like to be human.
So, which is interesting that you just said that, because the word enlightenment freaks a lot of people out.
Yeah.
And my understanding of it for a very long time, and still I don't really get it, was enlightenment is sort of like to transcend, or like be able to now remove yourself from the human experience.
Yeah.
It seems like you have a different
I
interpretation.
have the opposite,
Yeah.
and I don't know what enlightenment means either. And I don't know, I mean, I read about it and I study about it and I go, oh, maybe it means this, maybe it means that, but I really don't know either. But what I have discovered, okay, forget about enlightenment. If you want to be more compassionate, more patient, have deeper love with the people that are in your life, that will happen for you in your meditation practice. And that is, that's fantastic. But the way that happens, this is my experience and my anecdotal observation, so nobody should take, I'm making this up in other words, is that when you try to transcend the human experience, those traits of compassion and kindness are no longer as available to you. But when you fully embody, when you try to be here, because transcendence is about trying to get somewhere else. And meditation practice, in the way I understand it, is not about trying to get somewhere, it's about trying to be somewhere. It's about trying to be right here. And at that point, things change. It becomes, in the Tibetan tradition, they talk about something called ordinary magic, which is auspicious coincidence and a path that unfolds before you. And being here, as much as possible, with putting your mind to the present moment, is, I would think, the gateway to that ordinary magic that makes your life really fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, and I just, the word ordinary magic conjures up just a big smile. I think it's, because everyone's going to interpret it differently, but it sounds cool.
Doesn't it?
I want some of that.
I do too, and you have some.
Sweet, you do. Which is it really kind of brings us full circle to what you're doing right now. Very recently, I guess a year and a half ago, right? You launched a really cool project, the Open Heart Project.
Thanks.
Talk to me about this.
Okay.
What's it all about?
Oh my God, it's been so cool and exciting for me. As you mentioned, I've taught meditation retreats all over the place, and at the end, I would say to people, if you want to continue to practice, fantastic, please find a meditation instructor, because it's very helpful to have some guidance along the path. And you can go to a Shambhala center, a Zen center, whatever.
Right.
But then, at one point, this lovely young woman raised her hand and said, I live in Provo, Utah, and we don't have any of those things. What can I do? And I was like, I don't know. And then that happened over and over. I live in Omaha. I live in Mexico. I live in Bosnia. And so I thought, well, okay, I'm a meditation instructor. I'll start sending out to these people, anyone who says they want it, meditation instruction. A little 10-minute video, like if you and I were to sit down together and I was to give you the instruction. Excuse me. That's exactly what these videos were. And that was cool. And then people would say, my back hurts, what should I do? Or why do we have to keep our eyes open? Or I notice the more I practice, the more sensitive I'm becoming. What is up with that? So I started making a second little video, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, answering a question. So now, a year later, I send this out to, now it's close to 6,000 people who are getting 2 videos twice a week, meditation instruction and a little Dharma talk, and some support for their practice who might not otherwise get support.
So essentially anybody around the world can have you as their teacher.
People all over the world are doing this. It's
That's
quite
amazing.
It is.
So that's a fair amount of work also. I mean, you're sending out 2 videos a week?
Yeah, it is a lot of work.
100 and something a year.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I just started a second version of the Open Heart Project called the Open Heart Project Practitioner newsletter, because now after a year there have been enough people who said, I don't want to just sit for 10 minutes and hear the introductory instruction every time. What else you got? So, but this one I charged for. And it's not expensive. It's $108 a year. But it's for people, and it's been quite amazing for me as a teacher to be able to offer something a little bit deeper, longer sits, closer connection with these 300 people. And, I hope it will be 10,000 people. Yeah. And I hope it will be my living.
Yeah, the bigger the better. So, on the one hand, you've developed something and you've tapped technology to take this thing that you teach to people and then share it with anybody who wants to do it in the world completely free of charge. Tremendous experience. And then you've said, okay, for people that are saying, I want to go deeper, I'll give you more of my time for a very modest amount, investment. So it's now turning into a real business.
Yeah.
Are you cool with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in our world, there are people who think you can either be spiritual or you can be ambitious or career-oriented or professional or whatever. And most people think you have to choose between those. Or at the very least, you have to, squash one a little bit and fluff up the other one. But I can see from your work, and my intention in my work is to honor both of those completely. I'm not ever going to try to dumb down the Dharma or make it palatable or hide the fact that the First Noble Truth is life is suffering. I'm not going to try to pretend that's not the truth. But at the same time, I want to be, and you too, smart and effective and do a good job of being a business person for the delight of doing a good job and because you believe in your personal product.
Yeah. And it's fascinating too, because I had, I had the wonderful opportunity to train a lot of yoga teachers. And we trained them in a lot of areas, and one of the things we trained them was practice building. I have a background in entrepreneurship and marketing, so to me, and every time we hit that part of the training, people would freak out.
Interesting.
They had really strong knee-jerk reactions away from doing things that would allow them to earn enough to live well and give well in the world. And the answer to it for me was, if you feel like you're here, like you love what you do, and what you do actually is a blessing to other people, it can change their lives, then you want it to get out to as many people as humanly possible. If you can't pay your rent, you have to stop doing it, so you impact nobody. So it's almost like it's counter to everything that you're trying to accomplish, not to turn this into a way to earn a decent enough living to live well in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to honor your intention to teach and to offer whatever your gift is. And interestingly, the act of doing business or making your living can also be practice if you hold your mind to it, if you place your mind to it, if you invest yourself in it, if you open up to it. So it's not separate from your practice. It can be, don't you find that?
Yeah, I agree.
It is your practice.
Yeah, I think you can, but you really have to make it your practice.
Yeah, you're right. And what do you mean by that?
I think you have to. You're interviewing me now.
Sorry, I want some help
too.
We'll
reverse it one day. No, I think it's you have to really be deliberate and you have to be present to make sure. Especially for someone like me, because I'm very entrepreneurial. I love to create stuff. So it's like for me, I have to check and say, wait a minute, and make sure I'm doing this from a point of service.
Yes.
And of soul first. And then it's okay to build a substantial business around it if I want. But that's got to be what comes second.
Right.
Rather, that's not the heartbeat.
I think that's really well said. Completely. I agree.
So, interesting question as we sort of like tie everything up. Music industry, tremendous writing career, meditation teacher, now building a really fascinating global business around that using technology also. At this point, do you have a plan?
No. Yes. My plan is to practice the Dharma as deeply and honestly as I can. And because my skill, such as it is in the realm of communication, to bring that to my practice too, and marry these two ends of my life or that aren't separate. So that's my plan.
Okay. So it's kind of the unplanned plan.
Yes.
I like it. Last question. The name of this project is Good Life Project.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say the phrase, when I ask what does it mean in your mind to live a good life, what comes up?
Something immediately comes to mind. And I reflect on the times that I've been the happiest in my life and where things have seemed the most, at the same time, exciting and stimulating, but also deeply peaceful and good. And that is when I sense that there is a powerful congruence between my inner life and my outer circumstance. When those two things connect, that's a good life.
I like that. Thank you so much for sharing some time with me today. It's always fun hanging out and chatting with you.
I love it too. Thank you.
So I'm Jonathan Fields. My guest today has been Susan Piver. You can find out more about her at susanpiver.com and find out more about the Open Heart Project there as well. Jonathan Fields signing off.